Welcome to the Supported Living Property Podcast with your host, me, Lisa Brown, the place to learn about supported living property investing. Hi Jackie, it's great to have you here today. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, and it's fab to be here. Thanks, Lisa.
Oh, it's great. I'm looking forward to this. So for people who don't know you, tell people a little bit about you. Can't get my words out already. It's not a good start.
Well, we started, I'm Jackie, Jackie Collier. Our company's Aireworth Property. So we're based just outside Bradford and Keighley, and it's pronounced Keighley, not Keighley, like everybody thinks. So Steve, my husband, and I started in property, did some training back in 2017. At the time, we wanted to get involved in doing some social housing, but didn't really know what to do, how to get in it. So did lots of training around buy-to-lets, HMOs, the usual stuff. Steve was on voluntary redundancy, so he had a little bit of money, but not a lot to get started. So at the age we were, I was 56, I think, and Steve was 51. So we're definitely at the longer in the tooth end, shall we say. So it's a case of do it or you're stuffed, basically.
So you had that time pressure. Actually, we've got to get ourselves financially more stable. Is that what your driver was?
If we didn't, there's very few people who are going to look to employ people well into their 50s. So in terms of getting a job, if it didn't work out, we would have limited options. I mean, at the time I had my own florist, so yes, I was running a business, but it's damned hard work, and I got a detached retina and this and that, and the world was saying you kind of need to give up on this and do something different. And when you put it in perspective of how many bouquets you have to sell compared to a house, it's quite a big difference.
It's a lot of work that goes into floristry, isn't there?
Absolutely. And to be honest, I never saw family. So at least doing property with Steve, we could spend time together and just really build our portfolio. And that really was our focus. Not particularly to do sourcing at the time, although we have done it a bit. Not particularly to do any rent-to-rent kind of stuff. It was literally just to build our portfolio, largely for cash flow, so we had income, but also for capital growth, so that kind of acted towards our pension. Did all that, still had this social housing thing in the back of our mind, but without knowing who to contact, the thing I found, it was like going to see the doctor, getting a doctor's appointment. All the receptionists were kind of like, yeah, I'll just take your details. And nobody would get you past that sort of front desk. And I think part of that was down to any landlord who didn't want to spend money on the property and therefore couldn't get rent on it, thought, I know, I'll give it to social housing because they'll be grateful. And how far from the truth can you be?
It's a long way off. But that was the perception, particularly a few years ago. And I think people had got away with doing that for a while, hadn't they? So I do think that there was a whole load of really poor quality properties dumped into the social housing space by private landlords. And I think that's where part of the poor reputation comes from, isn't there?
Absolutely. And I think then the receptionists, if you like, kind of got wary and were like, every landlord's like that, so we're not talking to anybody. And it kind of went completely the other way. So it took us a while to make connections and to get to know people. And we had quite a long chat with Christy Brown, who was fantastically helpful. She kind of pointed us in the right direction and helped us understand what social housing meant. Because again, perception is it's DSS tenants, not necessarily looked after by a housing association. It's just people on benefits. And it's a bit like football hooligans. Everybody tars football supporters with the same brush that they're going to be hooligans. Probably less so now, but I'm going back to like...
Yeah, exactly. Oh, you don't want that team coming because they're full of hooligans. Yeah.
Exactly. And people have very, very preconceived ideas. And it's like, oh, well, they'll wreck your house, they won't pay the rent, it'll be awful. And getting past that it's really hard, not necessarily ourselves, but with other people. So when we started working with housing associations, obviously you're one tier up. So you're still, when I say one tier up, I mean you are working with the housing association, not the tenant directly. So that added kind of a layer of protection, because I mean, Bradford Council, which is one that we're with, did a tenant finder service where they would find you a tenant. It's a 6-month AST, and you know, the people that they were trying to get off the housing list. In reality, you had no protection. I mean, we didn't do it because you had no protection. Yeah, it's a 6-month AST. They can pay or they cannot pay. It's up to them because they're the ones paying. There was no cover for whether they damaged the property or not. So why use it? Because you're no better off than finding the tenants and vetting them yourself. It was just a bit...
You're worse off in some ways because you're not having any choice over your tenants. Yeah.
Exactly. So I don't know if other councils do it the same, but that's kind of how it was working in Bradford. Whereas comparing that to a housing association where, okay, you don't have any say in who comes in, but it is on a lease to the housing association, not on an AST. So you're on different rules, different regulations. They are paying the rent, and it's guaranteed rent because it's government-backed income. If they don't pay the rent, then because it's effectively a company lease, you can stop the lease. It's not like you have to go to all the courts like you do with an AST. Obviously, you don't want to do that because you've got people living there and you don't want to make their life difficult. But you just have a bit more power in terms of making sure things happen. And they do like a full maintenance lease. So yes, you cover the structure, like if there's slip slates on the roof or the boiler. Everything else is covered as part of the lease. So again, if somebody does damage things, because you can't always like say it's never going to happen.
In wherever your tenants, whether they're private tenants, social tenants, whatever the tenants, yes, stuff does happen in properties. Yeah,
exactly. But they fix it. So it worked really, really well. Kind of, it ticked boxes for us in terms of getting into the social housing space and helping vulnerable people, because it was people like domestic abuse. I don't like to use the word victim, but survivors, people with mental health issues, asylum seekers. There's a whole variety of people in need. And now, even just people who have fallen on hard times because the way the economy is, they might have lost their job, something's happened, COVID, they've not got a job back, whatever it may be, through no fault of their own, they can no longer afford the outgoings that they had and need help. So, you know, it could be me, it could be you, it could be
any of us. Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. So that preconceived idea is so far from the truth. But so you're helping people, but also from a commercial business sense, it actually works really well because the rent's guaranteed. Depending on who you work with, it might be LHA rate, it might be more. Obviously, you've got to make sure it's not so much more they're putting themselves in financial difficulty.
Yeah.
So you've got to be careful, but you know, the rent is equivalent usually. You haven't got any letting fees for agents. You haven't got any management fees, maintenance fees. You haven't got any situation really where you're getting a phone call saying, oh, this has gone wrong, can I repair it or whatever. Really, 5 years, we'll have another conversation. So from a cash flow point of view, it works really well. From the social point of view, it works really well. From a time point of view, it works really well.
And time is so precious, isn't it? You know,
totally. And people don't always factor that into their costs.
No.
yeah, it's a bit like when builders are doing a refurb. They can do it so much cheaper because they get all the materials at cost, and they don't have any labour because they don't factor in how
Their
much
own
time they're spending doing that and not earning money elsewhere.
Yeah.
So yeah, for us, it really, it was a no-brainer. What's not to love?
And you guys have been doing this now for a little while, haven't you? So you've kind of you've seen it through a bit, in the way that there's a lot of people coming into the space who are shy, you know, talk, oh, it's really exciting and new, but you guys have actually sort of lived it and seen how that's working. And you know, what is it that what kind of properties is it that are needed? Because I think people have a preconception of the kind of properties that are needed in this space. What are the properties that you're handing over to the housing associations you work with?
Again, preconceived ideas. It's homeless people living in an HMO. That's immediately what people go to. We don't touch HMOs at all. I've never wanted to do HMOs. I still don't want to do HMOs. No, absolutely not. So we are doing 2, 3, 4 bed houses that are single family lets. It's the families that are in desperate need. Oh, we have the odd 1 bed flat that we work with a local charity, homeless charity, that they take that. But the main focus is 2, 3, 4 bed houses for families. And yeah, when you think that the amount of homeless, and I don't mean living on the streets, but the sofa surfing, the temporary accommodation, all that kind of side of things, how many people are literally in some version of temporary accommodation? And more often than not, that is a bedsit, a hotel room, a B&B. If you've got a family in one room, that is really, really not good for their physical health or their mental health.
No.
So that, if you're going to be mercenary about it, from, again, an economic point of view, that kicks down the line how much healthcare people are going to need that costs money.
Oh, completely. The impact of poor housing is hugely significant, is it, on health, on physical and mental health, but also the impact on, say, the teenagers and kids, and they're not being able to access school, they're not able to do homework because they've got a toddler climbing all over there, they've not got a desk to sit and do their work on, you know. It has such impact.
It's just not a way for kids to grow up.
No,
it's not a way for adults to live either.
No.
But you know, it's the kids are particularly kind of get to your heartstrings, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, and economically, if you think, I mean, obviously we're in Bradford, which is a long way off the likes of the southeast in terms of monetary value, but if you compare the council are probably paying about £100 a night for these rooms, you know, £700 a week, compared to less than £700 a month for social housing.
For a much better property that's going to meet that family's needs much better. Yeah.
They can have their own space. You know, we furnish all the properties, so they don't have to worry about any of that. The housing association we're working with at the moment care about the tenants, and that again is very much why we're working with them, because different housing associations have what I class as different levels of human kindness. Is that right? It's how you weigh up the money that they get in to the care, and I don't mean necessarily the social care, but just the care that people are living in a decent environment. Yeah. And the ones we work with now are lovely. I mean, Christmas time, they went round to all the houses that had kids and took them like little Christmas bags of sweets and things. It's not massive, but it's such a nice gesture that helps the kids settle in and feel that they've got something, you know. And sometimes they'll buy them like a teddy bear when they're moving in if they've got nothing. And that to me is really what it's about. It's not about just give me the money, because there's perhaps a higher rate that they're getting because of the involvement that they have to have in terms of making sure the family are happy and everything. So, yeah, if it only comes down to the money, it's never going to be a win.
No.
For anyone. It really isn't.
No.
You know, that the houses need to be warm, safe, comfortable, and people can live there and feel like it's their home.
Yeah.
Not it's got mold or it's dirty. Well, obviously, you know, starting off dirty, but things coming off the wall or the wallpaper peeling, or that's no way for people to live.
No, and certainly, I mean, anyone only needs to look at your Instagram feed to see the quality of the properties that you guys are turning out. You know, they're good quality, safe family homes, aren't they? Really, is what you're providing. Is there anything different about the properties that the housing associations are looking for when you're working with them, or are they just the standard what you would do for private rental tenants as well?
Yeah, just, well, the over and above are things like you need fire doors on the kitchen. Fire door on the living room, so on the risk room. So it's not like an HMO where you need them on every bedroom, but you do need them on the risk rooms. You need to have those kind of risk rooms with some fireboarding. So you've got the fire protection. You've got your interlinked heat and smoke detectors, depending on the house, because a lot around us are 3-4 stories even. Again, we would always put an escape window on the first floor just to make sure. Nobody wants anybody dying on their watch. No. And just to make sure that it's safe, and a lot of it's logic. A lot of it is logic. And of course, we furnish them as well. So that, again, we provide, I mean, for all properties, you would put in, obviously, oven and hob or a cooker or whatever. But on top of that, a fridge freezer, a washer dryer, a microwave, a kettle, and then normal furniture like 3-piece suite, depending on how many people it's housing. Dining furniture, so they've got somewhere to eat, beds, bedside tables, drawers, wardrobes. So like you would do for a house you were living in.
And with that under the lease, do they then take over the maintenance of that washer dryer if there's a problem with it? You're not expected to then be maintaining that throughout it.
No. And when you put it in new anyway, you've usually got a manufacturer's warranty to start with. But yeah, they take responsibility for all of it. At the end of the lease, they give the house back in pretty much the condition you've handed it over, give or take a bit of wear and tear, to be fair. But if the furniture needs replacing, they replace the furniture. So you get that. But to be honest, the demand is so high. Why are they ever going to hand it back? You know, if you want it back, that's fine. So the association we work with have a break clause. So they could give us notice, or we can give them notice, like 3 months notice. And that helps with mortgageability. So some housing associations don't have a break clause, don't have a rent review. Whereas with us, they have a break clause and they review the rent in line with LHA rates. So as the LHA rates go up, the rent goes up. But that I say helps with mortgageability, because one of my biggest bugbears is the whole mortgage industry. And this is why I'm going to upset them all.
No, it's fine. I think what you're about to say is what I say on a regular basis, Jackie. So go for it.
I mean, literally, I'm in talks with our MP on some of this because it's just bonkers. The fact that mortgage lenders don't like lending if you have social housing tenants. It's like, but it's so much safer. You know, if you've got a private tenant, they could lose their job tomorrow. They can decide to just stop paying the rent, and it takes you forever to get your money back or to evict them. And you've still got to try and still pay the mortgage, compared to we've got 5 years guaranteed rent, government backed. Who's going to not pay? And what you need to do is the due diligence on me as a landlord that I am going to pay, and I'm the sort of person who's not going to stop paying, not on the fact that it's got vulnerable people in, because you're only ever going to have to evict them if I stop paying. So do your due diligence on me, not on them.
Yeah.
You know, and the fact that there's a minimal number of lenders who will lend, and they charge higher interest rates for doing it, it's just bonkers.
It's so frustrating. And if you have an element when you then go to regulated care, if someone's got care in the property round the clock, then it makes it even harder again to get mortgages. And it's just like, but actually you've got support team in there making sure that property's okay. So actually, if it was my money and I was a bank, I'd much rather lend it to that house than say a property where there's very minimal support going in and someone's only there for an hour a week. Where's the property going to be better maintained?
Illogical.
Makes no sense.
So illogical on so many levels. Like we said earlier, it's illogical with the council putting people in temporary accommodation over and above, but I mean, they can't get enough houses, which is part of it. It's illogical on mortgage lenders, how they view it. Insurance brokers, just the same. I mean, it's just more money. It's still worth doing it from a commercial point of view. But it's just frustrating because you have a limited number of people that you can actually access to provide the mortgage or to provide the insurance and such like. And I mean, we had one, we refinanced, it actually was in my name rather than the company name. We refinanced. We'd never refinanced it for a whole variety of reasons I won't bore you with, but it's down to lenders. So we finally, the fixed term had finished. So the tenant we'd had from day one, who was a private tenant, actually moved out. We handed it over to social housing and we refinanced it onto a new mortgage. I cannot explain why, but they valued it probably 15 grand less than all the comps in the area. And they valued the rental income £100 a month less than the lease we got already signed and in place for the next 5 years.
Just no logic to it at all.
Not whatsoever. And it just flabbergasts me how difficult they're making it, because, you know, in reality, and people say, why should landlords have to help social housing? The reality is there is nowhere near enough funding or availability or capacity in terms of properties for the government or councils to do it themselves.
No,
we've
got such demand, haven't we? Like down here where I am, down in Devon, we've got so many landlords are selling up at the moment, putting properties across to Airbnb. We've got so few private rental properties available. I mean, and if you have social housing, it's even harder. So we've got a huge crisis. Like there is all over the country, I know, but it's sort of amplified down here. And we need to be doing stuff about it. We've got landlords who can do that. We've got property investors who can make this difference and have this real impact. We need a bit of help from the mortgage companies.
And I mean, almost like there needs to be some government incentive as opposed to the blockages. And I don't mean that the government particularly blocking it, but they're actively encouraging it. And if you think, empty houses, it's another thing that could easily be turned into homes to help all these families. Yet here, and I know again, every council's different, here, once a property has been empty 2 years, you pay double council tax. It doesn't reset when you buy the property. It's bonkers. If it's 5 years, you pay triple council tax. These are properties that we could buy. We could do them up and put somebody in so they've got a home. It makes the economy or economics of doing that much harder when you've got to factor in so much more council tax in their holding period. So that doesn't help. They don't, knowing what we do, we can't be given, or we can't be seen to be given preferential treatment to know that they're going to sell something. So they stick it on the open auction. Anybody can buy it. And in reality, what happens is somebody in London sees a property that's available for 50 or 60 grand up here, and they go, oh my God, it's a bargain. Buy it. It still sits empty for ages because they don't have a refurb team up here to be able to do it. The chances of going across to social housing are even less. Again, where is the logic?
No.
But compare that to Wales. In Wales, they have, I think they call it a house to home grant or something. So if the property's been empty for a number of years or a period, the government actually will give the investor an interest-free 25 grand loan, or up to 25 grand loan, to do the refurb on it.
Sensible.
Makes so much more sense.
Yeah.
And that is something that really could do with being rolled out nationwide. It would help so much. So much.
Jackie for Prime Minister, there we go. We'll get it all sorted. That'll be great.
I'll just do for Housing Minister for now.
Okay, that'll do. Yeah, we'll take that.
To be fair, our MP is really, really good. He's so on board with stuff and very, very active. He's always up in Parliament talking about stuff. And we had a really good meeting with him at the beginning of April. Did like this long report. Like, I don't know if you can see, did like this great report on, you know, all the mortgages, the empty homes, all of these things. So he's taken it down to the Housing Committee.
Great.
So he's kind of presenting it to a Housing Committee, just to kind of hear it from a landlord's perspective.
Yeah, yeah.
And I said to him that if you want us to go down, I will jump on a train tomorrow. I am more than happy to come in and give them firsthand our views on how this does and doesn't work. Fingers crossed.
No, that's pretty. I mean, the other thing that's interesting about the way that you guys have done things is you've managed to kind of scale this and keep working with the housing associations and kind of on almost a rinse and repeat kind of model, haven't you? How have you done that? What would you say? Any advice around that or anything that you found?
At the moment, they're going, can you slow down? So, as I said before, obviously building our portfolio has always been a big part for us. So we work an awful lot with private investors who lend to our business. We give them the higher return on the money and then refinance. And the refinance bit, again, is another reason for doing the houses up so nicely, because you're effectively selling your house to the bank. So if they come in and the house looks mega, the valuer just by sense values it a bit higher. So that's the reason for doing that. So we've managed to get a lot of private investors that have helped us do that. We've got a lot of direct to vendor out there. So again, people coming to us, buying off landlords, mainly landlords who haven't wanted to spend the money on improving the properties themselves, got out to them. And then the other thing that we're doing now is trying to work with landlords who want to hold the asset, but don't want the aggravation of private tenants. So with kind of a rent-to-rent situation, but we're sitting in the middle. So we are going to be their point of contact. It makes it easier for the housing association because everything goes through us. But if we can get more landlords on board, we've got those 2, 3, 4 bed houses. At the moment, mainly Bradford, Wakefield and Leeds, but that's growing all the time. Trying to get those landlords to work with us. They then keep the asset, they get the rent, but they have a pretty passive time compared to perhaps how they have been working with it. You know, particularly landlords, old school landlords that manage themselves. Yeah, there's a lot of time involved in self-management of properties,
and it's got more and more complicated, hasn't it? All the legislation to understand it all. Yeah,
totally, and financially more difficult because obviously all the legislation to do with that. So I mean, that's not particularly going to ease, but at least if they're not putting the time into having to manage it, it makes it better.
So you're taking it on from those landlords and then you're leasing it to your housing association.
Yeah, so we work with the landlords in terms of what needs to be done to the property. They sort that out, and then we literally, like I say, sit in the middle. We make sure it meets the spec that the housing association need. We make sure that the money's coming through and they're getting paid, which it does anyway, but if there is any little sort of issues, particularly at the start where people aren't certain, they can ask us, and it takes a bit of the weight off the housing association in terms of having to deal with 20 landlords when they can do it with us. So and again, it's just a way of trying to get more stock into the housing or the social housing system. So yeah, that's kind of something that we're really working on this year. So
I think it's really interesting, and I know there's quite a lot of people looking to try and get into sort of rent-to-renter, supported living, rent-to-renters, social housing, and it's tricky to get right. And I think the thing that's good about you guys is that you've got that track record already, you've got that established relationship with the providers, but you've also got your track record of managing properties and, you know, all of that. So that sets you ahead of someone else, doesn't it? So I think that
trying to do something or get somebody else to do something we haven't done. So we totally believe in it. We're doing it. It's our main strategy. We're just trying to help other people benefit from it all round. But the biggest obstacle is what we said at the start. It's that perception. Well, why would I hand my house over to social housing for it to be wrecked? It isn't going to be wrecked. It is going to come back to you in the way that you have handed it over. It's going to be looked after. Just because it's social housing doesn't mean to say that people are going to smash it up. People are happy and grateful for a nice, warm, comfortable home. Yeah, that is what you're giving. And that's what you expect of your private tenants. There's no reason to expect anything different from your social housing tenant. The difference is you're going to get paid your rent and you're not going to have voids. You have got more consistent income with less input from yourself. That's what we're trying to get over to people. So yeah, that's the biggest challenge, I would say.
Yeah, and finding the providers to work with. You know, obviously you've got those relationships now, but it takes time to build those relationships, doesn't it, at the beginning?
Very much. And it is talking to a lot of people and getting to the right people. And for me, I found the best way of doing it was actually to go through something like LinkedIn and search for housing associations, search for the property managers within those housing associations, and just set up a Zoom or go and meet them for a coffee and understand what they want. Because again, going back to this preconception, people think every housing association wants something and works one way. And they all want different things, and they all work different ways, and they all have different criteria and requirements. And like from the supported living level, obviously you've got a higher requirement than you've got for what I'd call normal social housing, which is probably a higher requirement than if you've got DSS tenants on a straight AST. But don't just find a house and then find a housing association to hand it over to, because if you haven't got the right property in the right area with the right criteria, it might not work. You need to understand what they want, what they're looking for, and financially what they pay, how they pay, and how that works. And you need to make sure you can refinance it.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, and it's understanding how to work and how to work together. As you know, that's what I'm passionate. That's what we do in the Supported Living Property Network, which I know you're part of as well, you know, but it's about bringing people together, isn't it? So actually you can understand, and a lot of the providers have fed back what they found about it is actually they've enjoyed understanding it from the property investor's perspective, because they hadn't thought about some of the challenges, like you talking about mortgages. Some of them just hadn't realized that was an issue and that was a barrier, and they're like, well, why is this happening? And it's a complicated space to get right, isn't it? And I think we need better communications, people talking together to do that. You know, I think that's really key.
Yeah, it's very chicken and egg, and people really struggle with bringing it all together. And it is, like you say, it's just about communication and talking to people, see who you've got rapport with and who you can work with, and then how you can help each other. That's literally what it's down to. I mean, the housing association we work with, love them to bits. They're just amazing. I had a coffee with them last week, and it was like, oh, I've been telling people about you, and I keep saying Jackie this and Jackie that. So now I've got to introduce you so you can help them get some property. But that's great, because it's helping the whole sector improve and move forward. And the more we can get people on board, the more people that can do it. You know, it's not a case of, oh, well, I'm doing it, so I'm not telling anybody else. Dear God, there's plenty demand for everybody to be able to do it. Yeah. Too much demand, sadly.
There is, and I think it's only going to get worse, isn't it? So yeah. Oh, Jackie, thank you so much. It's been so useful. You've shared lots of really great information. With everyone.
I've loved it.
We'll put your contact details in the show notes, so people want to get a hold of you there. We'll pop those all there so people can find you. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye now.